And we are back with the fourth segment of the GSMC Sports Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this fourth segment, we are going to be looking at some of the worst trades in the history of the NBA. And we're going to start out with the most recent one because this segment was inspired by the most recent one, the Karl-Anthony Towns trade. In my opinion, at least right now we have to wait until, the rest of the years with the Knicks develop. This might be the worst trade in the history of NBA basketball. Again, might be. We have to see how it develops, of course. But really, this is probably one of the worst trades because of the situation that the Timberwolves were in already with Karl-Anthony Towns. So just a little bit of a reminder. Last year, the Timberwolves, they made it as far as the Western Conference Finals with Karl-Anthony Towns, Anthony Edwards, and Rudy Gobert. I previously thought that the Rudy Gobert trade was the worst trade in NBA history because why on earth would the Timberwolves give up so much capital and talent for somebody like Rudy Gobert? It just did not make any sense to me. But at the end of the day, I was proven wrong, and this team was able to do something that I never thought they would do, which was make it to the Western Conference Finals. And normally when a team makes it that far, you run it back with the same squad. But then out of nowhere, the Knicks decide to send the Timberwolves a package which encourages them to trade Karl-Anthony Towns. And it's completely backfired for the Timberwolves. And it's a lot of people, myself included, were questioning, like, why on earth would the Timberwolves give up Karl-Anthony Towns, a key player and a big reason why the team was able to make it to the Western Conference Finals in the first place, for a mediocre player like Julius Randle. Like, the Timberwolves now are the 9th seed. They're 18 and 17. The Knicks are the third best team in the NBA. Granted, they were still the third best team or the second best team in the NBA in the Western Conference. Excuse me, that was a hiccup right there. They were the second best team or the third best team in the Eastern Conference last season. So you could argue that not much has really changed. But Karl-Anthony Towns and his numbers are unbelievable in this season. He's averaging 25 points per game, and I believe he's also averaging 14 rebounds per game as well. His numbers are much better than what they were last season when he played with the Timberwolves. I mean, he went from 21 points per game to 25 points per game. He went from shooting 50% from the field to 55% from the field, and he went from 41% to 44%. Now, obviously, the defense is a little bit blah with Karl-Anthony Towns, but you don't get him because of the defense. You get him because you want to shoot that three. That's why you get him. And the fact that they decided to get rid of him for Julius Randle, who I think is one of the most incompetent playoff performers in the history, one of the most incompetent playoff performers in recent history, it's a terrible move, in my opinion. I mean, you're giving up length, and you're giving up, yes, he can play make a little bit better, but really, is that what you want in a power forward with the situation that you're in with Rudy Gobert? I don't think so. And it's not like Julius Randle is a balanced defender or a better defender than Karl-Anthony Towns. Maybe even at the power forward position, he might not even be like a better defender than Karl-Anthony Towns. But I digress. I don't think that was a good trade, but there have been several other trades that you can make an argument are way worse than that. Like, for example, the Paul George trade from, sending him from the Thunder all the way to the Clippers. Remember, I'm sure all of you guys remember that trade. It's probably, with hindsight in mind now, probably one of the worst trades ever in the history of the Clippers franchise. And obviously, I'm talking about the Karl-Anthony Towns trade in hindsight, so without hindsight. So maybe it won't be as good of a trade, or maybe it'll be seen as a better trade in the future. But as of right now, I think the Karl-Anthony Towns trade is a really, really bad one. But is it worse than the Clippers one? I'm not entirely sure, but it is really, really close. Because remember, the Clippers, they give up. I dumb it down by saying the Clippers gave up 1,000,000 draft picks in order to acquire Paul George. And what makes it a bad trade is that the Clippers, they were expected to win a championship, and they did not do that. The duo of Paul George and Kawhi Leonard were barely able to play together in the postseason, and especially considering how Kawhi Leonard was bragging in commercials about how Los Angeles was his city, and he has no championship rings to show for it. And it's like, that's a really bad move. Not to mention what they had to give up for that. They had to give up Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Danilo Gallinari, and 7 first-round picks. 7 for no championships. That is an awful trade. And it makes it even worse because Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is playing like an MVP caliber player. And the Thunder seem to be the favorites to winning the championship aside from the Boston Celtics. And it's like now it starts to seem like this is the worst trade in recent memory aside from the Karl-Anthony Towns trade, like with hindsight in mind, because again, Kawhi Leonard and Paul George, they had everything that they needed to win the championship and they just did not get it done. Some of the other trades that were really bad are more so bad because of what the players were able to accomplish later on in their career. But before I get into that, another trade that was really bad was the Houston Rockets trading for Charles Barkley from the Phoenix Suns. So Houston, they gave up their entire young core just to get Charles Barkley. Now, keep in mind, at this point, Houston had won back-to-back titles with Hakeem Olajuwon and Clyde Drexler. Now, they had a disappointing ending in 1995 to 1996, and they decided to trade for Charles Barkley in the 1996 offseason. And in the trade, the Rockets shipped away their entire young core of Robert Horry, Sam Cassell, Chucky Brown, and Mark Bryant to the Suns for Charles Barkley. And the biggest problem with this was that Charles Barkley was getting old. And he wasn't the best he wasn't one of the best players in the league at the time. And they started off strong, but they made it to the Western Conference Finals, but then they ended up losing to the Jazz. And that would be the furthest that Houston would end up making it in the playoffs with Barkley in the 4 seasons that he's there, which is all the more disappointing. And although the Suns never found much success, Cassell became a solid point guard, eventually winning a title with Boston in 2007, 2008. And we all know how good Robert Horry had it with the championships. I mean, he has 7 of them and is considered by a lot of people one of the most clutch players of his time. And overall, this trade was just really bad for Houston. Another bad trade was the Bucks trading away Dirk Nowitzki to the Mavericks. But I feel like that trade isn't really as bad as people make it out, because you have no idea how good a rookie is going to be when they get drafted. You do not expect a rookie to just all of a sudden be the 3rd best power forward in the history of power forwards. You don't really expect that to happen all the time. One trade that I think might be worse than that is the Lakers trading for Russell Westbrook. The Lakers had everything. They were set to repeat in 2020, 2021, and they were eliminated from the playoffs in the Suns. And then they thought, okay, we need a drastic move. We need to get another star. And so they add Russell Westbrook, who, in my opinion, is one of the most inconsistent and inefficient players in the history of the NBA. He brings a lot of good to the team, but he also brings a lot of bad. He only elevates. He's a floor raiser. He's not a ceiling raiser. He only elevates bad teams. He doesn't make good teams great. And that was something that the Lakers learned the hard way. So that's another trade that I think is really bad. And one of the worst trades in the history of worst trades, the Brooklyn Nets trading for Paul Pierce and Kevin Garnett, and the draft picks turning out to be Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum. That is a terrible trade because, now we have hindsight, and we see that the Celtics ended up winning a championship with those draft picks, before the Nets were even able to make it to the finals. So, tough. Really tough on them. Another bad trade, but again, I don't really think it's that bad of a trade. Actually, no, this is a really bad trade. 76ers trading Wilt Chamberlain to the Lakers because Wilt Chamberlain came off of 3 straight MVPs. You trade away somebody who came off of 3 straight MVPs, that is a bad trade. Another bad trade, the Bucks trading away Kareem Abdul-Jabbar to the Lakers. Again, that's more so a hindsight trade because no one expected Kareem to win 5 rings for the Lakers. He was fantastic before and after he was on the Lakers, like, when he was on the Bucks. But still, I don't think anyone really expected that. Seattle Supersonics giving away Scottie Pippen to the Chicago Bulls and making the Chicago Bulls win 6 championships in the span of 8 years. That also might be another bad trade. The Hawks trading away Bill Russell to the Celtics, another bad trade. And the worst trade, one of the worst trades that a lot of people might think is the worst trade, is the Hornets trading Kobe Bryant to the Los Angeles Lakers. Now, we all know Kobe Bryant, he has 5 championships, and you do not expect a player that is 18 years old to be as legendary and as good of a player as Kobe Bryant. You never expect something like that. So I don't really think that should be considered as one of the worst trades. But again, let me know in the comments what you guys think about that trade, and whether you think maybe the Hawks trade with Bill Russell is worse than the Kobe trade, or maybe there was another trade that I just missed that is the worst trade in the history of the NBA. I mean, Trae Young getting traded over to Atlanta and Luka Doncic getting traded over to the Dallas Mavericks. That's a win-win, but some people might see that as a bad trade for the Hawks for whatever reason. But let me know in the comments what you guys think. But again, that Hornets trade, I don't think it's fair to say that's one of the worst trades in the history of the NBA because nobody really expects an 18-year-old to be as legendary and as iconic as Kobe Bryant. No one expects that to happen. But that's all that I have in this 4th segment. So now we're going to go ahead and go into the 5th segment where I just give a little recap of the NBA games that happened on Sunday as well as the NBA games that happened yesterday. So I'll be right back after this short break. Be sure to stay tuned.